Gabs. Looks like we are live. Welcome to Gamcast for Sunday evening. We're here to talk about deporting foreigners on special visas and whether or not that's constitutional or not in the case of Mahmoud Khalil. This morning we had the Secretary of State Marco Rubio on Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan, who is perhaps the most arrogant and ignorant person on the mainstream media, and it sounded like this.
Can you substantiate any form of material support for terrorism, specifically to Hamas, from this Columbia student? Or was it simply that he was espousing a controversial political point of view?
Now, before we let the Secretary of State answer that stupid question, just assured, he has said many, many things that are supportive of Hamas and are anti-Semitic, including, among other things, supporting the October 7th terrorist attacks, which she knows. But anyway, Marco Rubio does a pretty good job here of pushing back and explaining the basics of the law. But I'm going to go into it and explain why this talk of constitutionality has nothing to do with this. And that Secretary Rubio is absolutely correct.
Well, not just the student. We're going to do more. In fact, every day now we're approving visa revocations. And if that visa led to a green card, the green card process as well. And here's why. It's very simple. When you apply to enter the United States and you get a visa, you are a guest. And you're coming as a student, you're coming as a tourist, or what have you. And in it, you have to make certain assertions. And if you tell us when you apply for a visa, I'm coming to the U.S. to participate in pro-Hamas events, that runs counter to the foreign policy interest of the United States of America. It's that.
And it really is that simple. You have a visa, you have a special conditional visa that allows you to stay for a longer period of time. If you leave the country as a United States citizen, you will get a 3-month visa in whatever country you go to. You have to leave after 3 months. These people are allowed to stay here for years because they're teachers, because they're students, because they have certain skill sets. That's fine. But you are here conditionally, and those conditions can be revoked. Same as if you get onto a mall and you do something that the mall doesn't like, they can revoke your invitation status. Now, a lot of people are freaking out on the left. Here's a good example on Twitter: police ideology in steps. First, it's non-citizens who get expelled for speech. He wasn't expelled for speech. He was expelled for promoting terrorism. Okay. Next, it's green card holders. Then it's naturalized citizens, and then eventually says it's going to be us. It's complete nonsense, complete hyperbole. On the Fareed Zakaria's GPS show, they try to do it a little bit more nuanced way, but here's a Harvard professor of law, supposedly, basically taking the next step, saying this somehow implicates the First Amendment. It does not. Whether you would get a special visa is not a First Amendment right at all. It can't be, because obviously you have to get it. You can't even be an American citizen. But listen to how he tries to bring it in, and I'm going to debunk it for you.
Is doing in trying to deport Khalil and things like that. Now, it's a different situation where you have every right to revoke a green card or a visa. But what do you worry about?
So Fareed just agreed with me. You have every right to revoke the visa, but now they're going to try to bring the Constitution back in.
This could be interpreted as an attack on the First Amendment.
It is an attack on the First Amendment. It's not close to an attack, because the U.S. Supreme Court has held all the way back to World War II, so for 80 plus years, that if you are a non-citizen who's present here lawfully and you're living in the United States, as Khalil was on a green card, you have full First Amendment rights. So
now, that is absolutely not correct. And you can see the next tweet here. This is Tony Nash. He tried to say the same thing a couple of days ago. Bridges versus Wixon, and then he also cites Plyler versus Doe. I know Plyler versus Doe because I lived through it, but I didn't live through it literally, but I was following the politics very closely and the law very closely when it happened. Bridges versus Wixon, I had to read. I read it this morning. It was a case of somebody that they tried to deport, not over speech, and not because he was a foreigner, but they tried to deport him because they had an act that said if you remember the Communist Party, you could get deported. The lower court judge refused to even hear his case. It went up to the Ninth Circuit. They affirmed. It went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, you must hear his case. They didn't say anything about him having speech rights. They just said he didn't get sufficient process before he was kicked out of the country. That in no way says that his First Amendment, that he had absolute First Amendment rights. It doesn't. Now, clearly, being a communist is on the tangent a First Amendment implication. But the case never went forward. The Supreme Court never said that. They just said you have to give him a hearing. And the Plyler versus Doe was the case in Texas where the so-called conservative Supreme Court back in the Reagan days said that you could not withdraw funds for schools that would allow illegals to come to school. Again, nothing to do with the First Amendment. These people are just lying about it. There's nothing to do with the First Amendment here with Mahmoud Khalil, and there's nothing wrong. There's not coming for us. If you were to try to be criminally prosecuted for this, they would have to respect your constitutional rights. And I'll finish with this. So there would be two, even if he did have constitutional rights, which he doesn't, but if he did, he still probably was violative, because there's two doctrines out there which limit free speech in this context. One is incitement. Probably not incitement, because his statements were sufficiently vague that they're not sufficiently imminent, and then there's not sufficiently defined. But he probably did violate the fighting words doctrine. As a civil libertarian, I don't like it, but it is the law of the land. If you say words that would make a normal average person want to fight you, those are fighting words. The things he said about the Israelis, the things he said about the Jews, things he said about pro-Hamas, clearly are fighting words. So even if he had constitutional rights, and he doesn't, he could still be kicked out. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, please, I forgot the tagline, I'm a little rusty. Please like, comment, share, subscribe. And if you do, I will see you on the next one.